Rick and I have been friends for 30 years, next door neighbors in Mill Valley. And it's a real treat to be doing this with him, and such a beautiful piece of work as this one.
Thank you.
And
He is a beautiful piece of work.
And I promise you, I will not ask you, is Putin in the Outback?
I'm not allowed to say for obvious reasons.
But it's such an extraordinary book. It's such an extraordinary accomplishment. And once I got a chance to post tonight, it gave me an excuse to read the book one more time. And it's more beautiful each time I go into it. And it has, to me, it's a very significant touch of what it means to be, in my case, American Indian, because I feel this sense of time and timelessness and sort of the integrity of the world is very comparable to Aboriginal. And so on any number of levels, this is a real treat. I just want to lead it off with one question, which was, what was your very first reaction when you heard that somebody wanted you to go down to Australia to photograph a woman with some camels? What was your very first reaction before you had a chance to think it through?
Well, I should back up a little bit, which is that I went to Australia for Time magazine. In fact, I'm going to jump to the first picture here. So I was sent to Australia not to photograph this woman with her camels. I didn't know anything about that. I was sent to take the pictures for this cover story, and the writer had already written the story, and so they sent me down to take pictures to illustrate the story, which is one of the frustrating things sometimes of being a photographer, is that if the story's already written, they're really only looking for pictures to back up what the writer wrote about. So if you find something else the writer has mentioned, those pictures will never be used. So it's always a little frustrating. And I was 27 years old when I was sent down to shoot this. I was very lucky. And the writer had worked with a social worker who had taken him into the Aboriginal camps to get permission to take his photograph. So he said, when you get to town, before you get to town, call this woman, arrange to meet her. She'll take you into the camps to get your permission so you can take your photograph. So I called her, and she said, when you get to town, come out of your pub, come out of the hotel, make a right, and I'll meet you at this pub. I have a terrible sense of direction, which will amuse you as you think about what I ended up having to do this assignment. And so instead of making a right out of my hotel to meet this woman at the pub, I accidentally turned left. And I looked up the street, and the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my life was washing the windows of my hotel. And I was 27 years old, and she was gorgeous, and I had 3 cameras around my neck, so I did what any red-blooded American boy would do, is I took some pictures of her, and she got really upset, started screaming at me, and said, "Put your damn cameras down, who the hell are you?" And one of the things I learned as a photographer, Bill, you know this, like if somebody gets upset, you always walk over and you talk to them, because usually people, if they get upset, they think you're making fun of them or ridiculing them. So I walked over and said, "I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. The picture was so beautiful, and the light." And she said, "What are you, some kind of goddamn journalist here to photograph our Aborigines?" And, you parasites come in here every week and say, "Why don't you leave these poor people alone? They don't need you to take pictures of them." And I said, "I am a journalist, I'm not a parasite." But there was no calming her down. She was really livid, so I apologized and I left. I went down the street, met the social worker. We worked all day in the camps, got permission, took my pictures, and at the end of the day, the woman who was working for me said, "What are you doing for dinner tonight?" And I said, "I'm going to go back to my hotel and work on captions. Roll 15 was blah, 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 this." And she said, "Well, a group of us that work with Aborigines are getting together at a friend's house, and would you like to come and meet some of the other people involved in the Aboriginal rights movement?" I said, "That would be great." So she gives me this address, and I drive to the outside of town, and I, again, think it got lost, because it was this dilapidated house, the roof, there's no roof on the house, the walls are falling in, it looks like an abandoned house, and I thought, and did it again, you know. But since I had driven all the way out there, I knocked on the door, and of course, who opens the door but the woman washing the windows of my hotel, and she said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "You know, your friend Jenny invited me," and she said, "Well, you can't take pictures of my friends. Put your cameras down." So I walked in, and I said, "Jenny, like, what is with your friend? I'm sorry I didn't kill her dog," you know. And then I saw she had camels in the backyard, and I said, "Why do you have camels?" And she said, "It's none of your business." So I went back to Jenny and I said, like, "What's with the camels? What's with this woman?" She said, "Well, she's got this crazy idea to walk across Australia with her camels," and anyway, so that's how I first met her. It was not a very auspicious meeting.
Did you get, as I get from your book, this sense of space and time, which is transporting? It simply is not an experience that you get off of American books, among other things, and that I don't get in books even about the Southwest. There's something so eerie, so strange, and hypnotic about it. Did you feel that you'd fallen into, after the first encounter, did you feel that you'd sort of fallen into heaven?
Well, I was mesmerized by her, obviously, and this very strange, fierce, very beautiful, and very intense woman. And I had never seen light in Australia. I mean, I felt like I've been wearing sunglasses my whole life. I mean, people said, "Did you use special filters? Like, what did you do something special with your film?" I said, "That's what it looks like. You're right. It looks like you landed on the surface of Mars. The red color in the sand is actually that red. There's very high iron ore content, but the light, like an hour after sunset, you can still shoot Kodachrome back then. I mean, there's this glimmer, this brightness of the sky that I've never seen anywhere. You know, in America, when the sun goes down, 10 minutes later, it's dark. But the twilight there would last literally for an hour or two.
You not only have that particular quality to deal with, you're dealing also with the quality of animal life, of a connection with Diggity, this wonderful dog that you took up, that you rescued. And I've never read so much about and appreciated so much camels.
Yeah.
I mean, the personality that comes off. Bub, Dookie, and little Goliath.
Goliath, yeah.
And his mother.
Celica,
Yeah. It is a connection there, a connectedness, which is just extraordinary.
She, you know, you always hear of camels being really nasty, and their legs are multi-jointed, they can kick in any direction. So,
Good to know.
Yeah. You know how a camel kills you, by the way? This is one great thing you can drop at your cocktail party. Camels will sit on you. Oh, actually, sorry, their neck is so strong they can lift 15 grown men. So when you see these camel rides, they can actually put like 15 men on a camel's neck. That's how strong it is. But the camels are actually quite intelligent. They don't like being dominated and subjugated. So that's one of the reasons they're mean. But to kill you, they will knock you over with their neck, which is, as I said, incredibly powerful. Then they'll sit on you and suffocate you. So they actually know what they're doing. I mean, when they want to kill somebody, they don't like, you know, gum you to death. They actually, they basically suffocate you, crush you.
Well, could you give me something anecdotal, because I love these animals so much. I didn't know it before I went into the book. Some of the experiences you had that didn't make it into the book.
Yeah, I mean, the camels loved her. They adored her, and they were like, you know, 2,000-pound dogs. They would sleep next to her at night. They would nuzzle her. They wanted affection. She would tickle their lips, which they loved. They're vegetarians, but if she was cooking meat, they would try to steal it from her. They were playful. Bub in particular, we came back one night and he had stuck his lips into a jar of honey that she'd accidentally left not completely sealed. And then when he got honey on his lips, he went like this. And so he came back, and the entire camp, all of our sleeping bag, everything was covered with this layer of honey. And then, of course, there were ants all over it. And she didn't ride them very much. She actually used them. People said, "Why did she need so many camels?" And they carried her water, which is the most important thing, and food, supplies, bedding. And it was she had to basically lift and load and unload about 400 pounds of gear every morning and every night. So she was in amazing shape throughout the trip.
Yes. There's one picture, children, and that was of Robin on the camel, and there appeared to be ants crawling up and down her face and arms.
I think there were flies.
Oh, there were flies.
Flies, yeah.
I don't know that that makes it any better.
That's true. But I mean, better than ants somehow. I know flies at least will go away. I mean, ants are kind of like, you know, on you. Do you know what the, there is a picture of Robin covered with flies, which you're seeing here, and Australian flies are actually different than American flies, not just their accent, but, American.
You've used that before.
Yes. I actually have never used that one. No, because anyway, in the United States, you know, in America, in North, when you do this, they fly away. When you do this in Australia, they don't move, but they actually just sit on you, and they're actually sucking the moisture out of your skin. And so in America, you feel them tickle because they're moving on you. But there's something in Australia called the Australian salute, which is this. You're trying to keep the flies out of your nose and your eyes. It's just horrible. It took me a long time. I never got used to it, but it was, you know, at the beginning, it was really horrible.
Did you feel a competition at all times between you and the other life forms for water?
No, I didn't feel that, but I thought you were going to say for the affection of the camel. Camels didn't like me at all. They were definitely, you know, in love with her, and they were like one-person animals. She was the leader of the pack. I mean, she had spent 2 years in Alice Springs getting ready for this trip. And at first she was actually ripped off. There was a guy, when she first got to Alice Springs, she met this guy, an Austrian camel, or, you know, he would give kiddie rides to tourists. And he said, if you work for me for free for 8 months, I'll give you, you know, 2 camels. And 7.5 months into it, he fired her, completely screwed her. And she had to start all over again. And then she met an Afghan camel herder who said, anybody can put up with that asshole that you know, ripped you off, I'll give you a job. And he said, I'll pay you half wages and I'll give you 2 camels. And he was wonderful. His name was Salih Mohammed. I got to meet him. He was wonderful.
I have read that no place on earth has more poisonous snakes than Australia.
Poisonous, all kinds of animals, not just snakes. There's a John Bryson wrote in the Sunburnt Country, something about there's like, Australia's got more things that want to kill you than anywhere else.
Well, there's this picture in there, kind of a chilling picture, of you apparently asleep as a fairly 6-foot snake.
Oh, that was Robin. That was, yeah.
Slithering the length of Robin.
Yeah, that was in the movie. I didn't have a picture of that in the book, but that was really a very, yeah. You had mentioned Diggity before, her dog.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little backstory on Diggity, because she talks quite passionately about this dog. And the reason I mentioned Diggity in terms of the snake is that if there was a snake in her sleeping bag, Diggity would warn her. I mean, Diggity, if they got lost, Diggity could lead her back to camp. Diggity, you know, if Robin walked 20 miles during the day, Diggity would scamper 20 or 40 miles during the day. And this is not in the movie, it's not in Robin's book. And I asked her one day, you know, where Diggity came. Robin didn't like it. Diggity loved me, which was good. And it was the first dog I ever fell in love with. And Robin was quite resentful at the beginning that Diggity liked me, because Robin was trying to be. Robin thought she'd sold her soul to National Geographic. She wanted to do this trip alone. She didn't want friends to come. She certainly didn't want this strange guy coming along with her, at least at the beginning of the trip. And so I asked her where, you know, how Diggity had become part of her life, and she told me that 2 years before she came to Alice Springs, right after she got out of university, she got a job working as a janitor at a local hospital in Brisbane. And the second night she was cleaning up a garbage bin, she heard these terrible cries coming from the basement. And she went downstairs and found that there was a room where they were taking stray dogs and doing, you know, cosmetic testing, you know, putting, you know, horrible stuff. And she just said she just couldn't stand the screams coming from the room. And she waited till everybody else left the second night and went into the room with her keys, opened up all the cages, opened up all the doors, and let all the animals out. And a little puppy, Diggity, had been brought in that day, and nothing had been done to Diggity at that point. And Diggity didn't run away. This little animal just like stayed by her side, and so she obviously lost her job, and she took Diggity with her, and that's how Diggity became part of her trip. So it was kind of a fitting turnabout that Diggity saved her life so many times during the trip.
Was there a point at which she began talking to the camels and Diggity?
Yeah, I think Robin did throughout.
In a way that actually had some real communication.
Oh yeah, I mean, she would talk all the time out loud to the animals. I mean, from the first time I met her, she regarded them as her companions. mean, she was the leader, and one of the things you need to do with camels is assert very early on that you are the alpha. But all of the animals kind of followed her, and she would talk to them all day long. And I mean, part of it is when she was alone out there for so many months, having the animals, especially Diggity, to talk. Diggity was like her daughter. I mean, literally, it was like her companion, her daughter, her friend, her confidant. This is actually her favorite picture of Diggity. Diggity looks like her. She hated my pictures, by the way. She likes them now, but at the time, I actually got a battery and a portable slide projector, and I brought my pictures out after the first time I'd been out photographing her, and I came back 6 weeks later, and I thought maybe if she saw how wonderful she looked in the photographs, I would kind of win her over. And I showed her these pictures, and she said, "You make me look like a goddamn model. You think I'm out here like pose?" It's like there's nothing I can do right. And of course, the more she hated me, the more I was smitten with her. I think that's sort of how it works, you know. But this actually picture now she loves. She said because Diggity looks like a cardboard cutout. There's something about the light. This is literally the last few minutes of light, at sunset. I mean, she was very exotic looking, and this is a picture. I shot mostly color during the trip, but this was about an hour after sunset. I never use a tripod, but the light was so low, and I had a Leica camera. All professional photographers, they shoot their important pictures, or not, but the professional pictures on their Canons or their Nikons, but the personal pictures, you always have a little Leica around your neck. And so this was a picture I took like an hour and a half after sunset, and at Ayers Rock. It's called Uluru. What's amazing about this rock is that it's 5 miles around, and you see this little cave right here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is that cave, and there she is at the bottom of it.
Oh my God.
And what's amazing is when it rains in the outback, brine shrimp hatch on top of Ayers Rock. It rains about every 12 years. So it's like, wait, in the middle of the desert, shrimp? Are you kidding? This used to be the bottom of the ocean, millions of years ago. And those little kits you buy for your kids with a shrimp patch, and you put the little eggs in. Apparently, it's something like that. So, literally, I felt like I'd gone to another planet. The whole thing was so surreal.
What are those white marks that look like?
Oh yeah, thank you. People have fallen off the top of Ayers Rock, and so they actually put dotted lines basically saying stay in the middle, don't get towards the edge. If you lose your balance, you roll off the edge. And but it does look like a weird super. Also the way that the way the line sort of continues down here, it looks like you drive off the edge of the rock.
On the black and white picture,
Yeah.
she has kind of a strange expression. What was going on there?
I think she was just talking to Diggity. She's just going making the ooh, and she's just kind of like cooing to her. This is actually her official portrait as of about 6 weeks ago in the Australian National Gallery, Portrait Gallery. They just made her sort of one of the notable Australians, along with the Prime Minister and other people. That every year they choose one Australian. And this picture had never been published before, so I was really thrilled that they chose this as her official portrait.
She was such a defensive person, well-defended person. How did your relationship change?
Every time I went out there, Robin was always challenging herself and also everybody around her. I had seen this with her friends. She wasn't just, kind of harsh to me, but I even watched with her friends who she didn't want coming on the trip with her at all. One day we were, I'd come out and we were sitting by the campfire, and she looked at me and said, you Americans you treat friendship like Valium. It's like the insult of the day. And I said, okay, what does that mean? She said, well, no, she said, every time I see Americans together, you're all saying, don't worry, everything will work out, it'll be fine. And I said, that's bad. She says, yeah, because in Australia, if you care for somebody, you risk your friendship to be a friend. You hit them over the head with a 2x4 if they're doing something stupid, if they're marrying a jerk, or if they have an abusive boss, or they're doing drugs, whatever it is. Like you risk, the really being a friend is to be brutally honest with your friends, but you all coddle each other. And I'm not saying that she was damning all Americans, but it was like she would say things like that, and at first I'd be like, fuck you. It's like, how dare you? And it's like, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. She was constantly, I was 28 years old when the trip started. It was a year after I first run into her, and but emotionally I was 19 years old, and it was like every girlfriend I had lasted a week, and then I'd get an assignment, and I'd leave. It's like, oh, we'll work this out when I come back. And I would never come back. So photojournalism is the world's finest form of delayed adolescence. And with Robin, I couldn't leave. I mean, I'd come back and I had to work things out. So she would call. I don't know. I was just. I mean, slowly, my feelings of affection were responded to. But in a very strange way, you know.
Now we have to know.
Well, I'll give you one other example first, which is that on one of the trips out, we were sitting by the campfire, and by the way, they're the flies. Yeah, really intense.
And how old is she at the time?
She was 27. And you would have thought she must have grown up in a cattle station. She actually was a philosophy and Japanese student at Brisbane University. She had no experience in the outback at all. And she'd spent 2 years in Alice Springs learning about it. It's so funny because my friends, when I told my friends I got this really cool, oh, I didn't finish the story. So when I first met her that week in Alice Springs, at the end of the week, Jenny, who worked for me, I was thanking her, and she said, remember Robin, the girl with the camels? And I said, yeah, she's a little hard to forget. She said she wants to ask you a favor, but now she's a little embarrassed because she's been so unpleasant to you. And I was trying to think, what on earth could she possibly want? So this is back that first week I met her. She said, Robin wrote to National Geographic a year ago and asked them for funding, and they never answered. And she thought, maybe you knew somebody there, she could use your name to write them again. And I said, I've been to photo workshops and I've met some of the editors, but I don't know if my name would help you at all. So I said, sure, use my name. And I got back to the States, and I got a phone call a week later from the editor of National Geographic, and he said, I don't know if you remember me, we met at a workshop. I said, of course I do. It was like he's director of photography at National Geographic. He said, well, we got this letter from this woman in Australia who says that you know her, and it sounds like an amazing journey, and we're thinking of funding her trip, but is she a nutcase? Is she going to die out there? We don't want the headline, National Geographic explorer dies in week 2. And I said, well, she's very fierce, she's very focused, I've seen her maps, I've seen her camels. And he said, well, since you guys are such good friends, you're the photographer that we send. So I went from complete elation, thinking, oh my God, National Geographic, to I'm going to die out there. I never had to change a tire on a car, let alone navigate the outback. So it was, my adventure was like just staying alive, because she'd spent 2 years getting ready for this. Oh, by the way, one other story. The raft you see back here. National Geographic doesn't pay very well, but the expenses are pretty much unlimited. So I bought a 4-wheel drive Toyota Land Cruiser. I had a second gas tank installed. And I went to an Outback outfitting store in Melbourne, where I was living before I started the trip. And I was kind of full of myself, and I said, I'm working for National Geographic, and I need gear for the Outback. And they saw me coming on my road. They sold me every piece of crap on the Outback, one of which was an inflatable raft. So I show up at the Outback, and my car is groaning under all this stuff. And Robin and her friends are in front of her abandoned house when I show up, and she goes, why did you bring a raft? And I said, for the flash floods. And they went, Jesus, that's so stupid. But there are no flash floods in the Outback. Not from a million years ago, maybe, but not recently. But I ended up using it to float my cameras through this 3-mile chasm we ended up going through towards the beginning of the trip. So it actually did come in useful. In the movie, it's used at the end.
Yeah, it's simply a pressing. It's really very impressive.
Yes. I'm sorry, did I even answer your question?
Not the big one.
I had not known before how scary camels can be. And that scene in which a bull camel is racing towards you with looking fairly malevolent was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, she faced lots of dangers. One of it was just getting lost, running out of water, breaking. If the camels had thrown her by accident or stepped on her, if she'd broken a leg or gotten, a disease. But one of the things that she's really warned about is that when male camels are in heat and you have a female camel, they will kill you to get to your female. In her case, if they had gotten to her female, they would have basically lured off all of her camels, because the female she had been raised in the wild. The 2 males were in captivity. So if the camels had run off with the wild camels, she would have died out there. So one of the dangers is that they would just wander off anyway. But the Salih Mohammed, who taught her about how to survive out there, said, you've got to take a rifle with you. She said, I don't want a rifle, I don't want to kill anything. And he said, you have to take a rifle with you. And in real life and in the movie, there was a moment where a bunch of wild bull camels start coming towards her. And he said, if you see camels coming towards you, you take your gun and you start shooting. You don't think, you start shooting. And there's this moment in the movie, it's really chilling. And I wasn't there when it happened, but she told me afterwards, it was just, she loves animals. And it just broke her heart. I mean, she was just so devastated. But she shot 2 of them, and then the other 2 ran away. But it's an amazing scene in the movie. I actually asked
Were
somebody.
those wild camels?
Sorry?
Were those wild camels?
In the movie?
No.
Yeah, they were there. I'm sorry. In the early 1900s, when they wanted to open up the outback, they actually brought wild camels in from Saudi Arabia because horses would have died out there. And so they built, not roads, but like paths through the desert. And then once they were done building these paths, they let the camels loose thinking they would die. But instead, it's like, cool, this is a desert for camels. So there's now 30,000, I think it's 30,000 wild camels, herds of camels in the outback. They actually go capture them and sell them back to Saudi Arabia because they're actually now purer bred than the Saudi Arabian camels.
Wow.
Something else you can drop in your next content.
So in the movie, did she play herself or something?
No, there's a wonderful actress named Mia Wasikowska, and I'm going to show you a few scenes from the movie towards the end, which it's amazing how much they look alike. In fact, they cast Adam, and they cast the actors to look like her father, her dog, obviously, the Afghan guy that taught her. I don't know why they thought it was important, but they did a remarkable job.
I had missed the first time I went through the book that the fact that Robin's mother took her life. Did this have any impact on her experience?
You know, the one thing that's been very sort of true, Robin's been true to from the beginning, she's never told anybody why she did this trip. And everybody speculated, was it her mother's death at an early age? Was it because she preferred animals to people? You know, was it strong feminism? Because in Australia, women tend to be either very, very strong or very passive, sort of one extreme or the other. You know, all the time I spent with her, I mean, you know, it's almost like the Mona Lisa. If we knew why the Mona Lisa was smiling, we wouldn't be talking about the Mona Lisa. You know, it's sort of it's one of those enigmatic things. And everybody that reads her book tracks or sees the movie, you sort of project your own fantasies. I mean, you sort of meant more to be like you know, sort of goodbye to everybody you knew and had to survive on your own wits. And so she's never answered the question. And she said, you know, if a guy had done this, nobody would be asking. Somehow, because it's a woman, oh, it must be traumatic. I must be trying to overcome something. I mean, the one thing that was interesting to me is, you know, so often when people do trips like this, they want to raise sponsorship, or they want to write a book, or they want to get famous, and she just wanted to be alone. I mean, she didn't want her friends there, she didn't want me. She felt the Geographic that she made a mistake from the very beginning, because now she owed them a story. And I kept saying to her, you should keep a journal, because someday you're going to want to write about this. And she said, why do you have to turn everything into a product? Like, why can't you just experience things and not be marketing it and packaging it? So when she finally did write a book, I was amazed that, you know, because she said she would never write a book, and then she wrote this amazing book. I mean, who knew on top of this she could actually write so well?
Yeah. But you must have wondered yourself a great deal and looked for clues.
Yeah, I mean, I do think she was more comfortable with animals than people. I think part of it was, it was also an age where people were looking for themselves. You know, in Australia, there's this thing called walkabout, which is it's Aboriginal, but also is now white or, you know, non-Aboriginal as well down there, where you go and look for yourself for a year or two before you get married, before you get a job. You wander the world, and the Outback's always had this really. Most people either don't go to the Outback, or when they do, they go as tourists. But there's like this. They talk about the dead heart of the desert, and there's this like magnetic pull that Australians always talk about, that something pulls them out there. She said that a year before she even moved to Alice Springs, she started having dreams about the desert, and it was always sort of the hot, pure. I thought the Outback was so ugly when I first got there. I thought she was exotic, and it was this dry scrub. I mean, you know, for Americans, at least a lot of Americans, you know, beauty is a rich green rainforest kind of thing. And I mean, you know, I've been to Santa Fe and New Mexico, and obviously there's a different kind of beauty, but it took me a while to sort of see it.
Yeah.
There was one other thing which was challenging for me. There was lots of things, but one was that Robin didn't wear clothes a lot during the trip, which is hard for a number of reasons. Sorry. But I did, you know, one of the rules if you work for National Geographic is that you have to send all your film undeveloped back to the magazine. You're never allowed to develop it yourself. And even, I asked them recently, what do you do now that's digital? And they said the photographers have to submit their cartridges or transmit everything. You're never allowed to delete anything now digitally. But, you know, I was falling in love with this woman, and I didn't want to send pictures of her naked back to these guys in suits in Washington, D.C. So I would go back to Melbourne or Sydney, develop my film, and only show them the frames I wanted them to see, and they were just furious. You know, and then I had to go out 5 times on the trip. So the first time I did it, they said, you signed a contract with us, and what the hell do you think you're doing? If you ever want to work for us again, you know, you never do that again. And I said, oh, I'm really sorry, and then next time I did it again. And they were, by the end of it, they were like ready to kill me. And then when the story came out, it was so successful, everybody really forgot about the fact that I thought I was committing professional suicide. Part of it was also I wanted her to know that my loyalties were to her and not to my career and not to the Geographic. And it was, you know, I wasn't quite sure she ever believed that during the trip.
That was her idea, it wasn't yours.
To do what?
Go walk around naked.
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't my idea. I asked her to put clothes on, which sounds bizarre because I knew, I mean, the Geographic was never going to use any of the pictures of her swimming naked through caverns. That wasn't their MO, you know. There was one story that took place during this is like 3rd time out there, and I showed up, and it never took me more than 24 hours ever to find her, despite my lack of direction. And she said, I don't understand how you found me. I mean, I haven't seen anybody in weeks. And as long as I could find an Aboriginal mission or a cattle station, the Aborigines always knew where she was. And she'd say, how? I haven't seen anybody. I said, all I know is I'd say, where, have you seen the camel lady? And they could always take me right to her. So I showed up and we were talking, and about an hour into the conversation, she said, when are you going to get here? And I said, excuse me? She goes, when are you going to get here? And I thought, you know, I was always worried about her sanity to begin with, just doing this trip. And I thought, you know, she's been alone for 6 weeks and she's talking to the camels. And I said, I'm sitting right here across from the fire, like you're there and I'm here. She said, no, you're not. She said, you know, you got here an hour ago, and all you're going to talk about, is your picture on the cover of Time magazine for the Taiwan cover story, you just shot it, where are you going to leave your car in a month? And she said, you know, you get out here and you tell me how much you want to be with me, and the whole goddamn time you're talking about something you're going to do or something you've done. It's like, if you're going to be here, then goddamn it, be here, and don't be lost in your head the whole time.
Wow.
And I remember now, you go to restaurants and you see every couple in the restaurant, you know, kind of doing this with their phones, and they're with everybody except the person they're sitting with. And it was, I mean, it was very profound. Some of the things she had said, it's like be here now, you know, back to that whole idea of like, we're never in the moment anymore.
Could you talk a little bit about her relationship with the Aborigines?
Yeah, most people, you know, Caucasians or tourists that go out there to learn about Aborigines. And she wanted to learn from them. She really felt that their culture, their history, their heritage, there was a lot that she could learn from them. And I think the fact that she was traveling so slowly through, they call it their country, I mean, through their region, they loved her. They were fascinated. She actually had these, back there's a little audio cassette tape, and she had language tapes that she brought with her to try to learn to speak the local dialects. So I think, somehow, you know, everywhere I went, the moment I mentioned the camel lady, they just loved the idea of this woman, you know, spending time, you know, walking through their area. Early on in the trip, about my second trip out there, one morning she woke up and she would describe her dreams. She had very vivid dreams all the time. And of course, you know, she's never keeping a journal, but I was furiously writing everything down. And she had this dream about a little Aboriginal man that came out of nowhere that traveled with her. And, you know, I had my journal, and then my 3rd or 4th trip out, suddenly there was this little Aboriginal man traveling with her, and I said, do you remember your dream at the beginning of the trip? She had no memory whatsoever of the dream. And this man had a huge effect on her life.
Eddie?
Mr. Eddie. Yeah. It was amazing. This guy didn't speak a word of English. He's in the movie, the man who plays him in the movie is wonderful, and just the affection between the two of them without being able to speak the same language is quite astounding.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been in situations where
I can't.
Microphone,
The
please.
microphone,
I'm sorry.
Well, you think you haven't much to say, have you? In situations where I don't have the means to talk, it's you are so, at least I've been so sort of debilitated. I've been unable to use the one thing I can do, and her eagerness to drop all that is pretty unique.
You ever seen children when they go to another country? They just like talk in their own language,
Yeah.
and somehow they figure out what's going on. Like there's so much nonverbal things that go on between people. And I think we kind of say, well, I won't understand because I can't, and somehow kids do it. And she sort of let. It's amazing. Again, I think I loved in the movie that they didn't even try translating what he was saying, but you kind of get the gist of it just from the body language and as I said, she did have a little bit of language, but she's probably got 5% at the most of what he was
So
saying.
the ability to reproduce the sounds themselves is pretty impossible.
Well, I also think the fact that she tried,
Yes.
which cracked them up immensely. They thought it was very funny, but again, it was so rare. I want to talk for a second, if I can, about this picture, because this was a very momentous photograph that I didn't know when I shot it. Like a second after I shot this picture, it was raining. You can see the raindrops coming down here. So it was a very slow shutter speed. But Dookie, sorry, Goliath in the back here, anyway, he fell right after I shot this photograph. Camels have, their feet are like ball tires, which allows them to glide effortlessly through the sand. So when it rains, which it doesn't very often in the desert, they stop in their tracks. They don't move until the rain has stopped. And she was trying to get to an Aboriginal mission, so she was forcing them to walk. And he fell right after I shot this picture. And she thought that he had broken his leg. And camels are like horses. If they break a leg, you have to put them down. They don't. It doesn't ever heal. And she needed all these camels to do her trip. So this is Dookie. And so I called. There was an Aboriginal mission about 15 miles away, and I flew a vet out who said he thought he had just sprained his leg, and so instead of shooting him, she basically nurtured him back to health. It took 6 weeks, and she just thought that I just remember she was so depressed, and it was about halfway through the trip, and she thought the whole thing was over. The Aboriginal kids, as I said, just were fascinated by her. But it was just this is when she finally got to the Aboriginal camp. This was like, the camels were like her children. It was just amazing, her affection for them. This is when she came into town. You can see he's limping back here. See his leg. But I love all the body language of the kids.
And how did you enjoy the tourists?
How did she enjoy the tourists?
And you too. You were also involved with these people, the photographers.
Yeah, well, there was a moment during the trip where it looked as if, every time I left her, I'd look in the rearview mirror of my car and wonder if I'd ever see her again. I was always so worried that she would die. She told me at one point she had like a rough map because they've got sort of these paths out there, and she said on the map it said you're going to come to an intersection. If you go take the left intersection, the road on the left, walk 2 weeks. And you'll come to a well where you can get water. And when she got to this place where the intersection was, there were 5 roads going off. And it's like, well, which is the road on the left? Is it the far left? Is it, And she said, over the years, ranchers and other people that have been out there just driven off and formed what looked like new roads. And she said she took the one on the far left, hoping that was it. And she said she walked for 2 weeks wondering every day, am I going to die, am I going to die, am I going to die? And thank God it was the one with the water.
It sounds almost like the Shackleton's expedition to the South Pole.
Yeah, right.
It's got that air of desperation in it.
Yeah, but the dread kind of wears on you after a while. It turns out she would have been fine, but she didn't know that at the time,
I think we ought to throw this open a little bit now to you. And if you have, I know you do have some good questions.
Can you tell us at what age you became a National Geographic photographer, and how does somebody get into that rarefied atmosphere?
Well, I was incredibly lucky. I mean, as I said, I thought I'd have to be, 50 or something before I ever, work my way up. And I'd worked for Time for a year before I got, hired for this job. And it wasn't, I was a freelancer, so I'd work for the New York Times one day, Geo the next, Time Magazine, Newsweek, anybody that wanted to hire me, I would work for them. So in between the trips with Robin, I was going off and shooting for the New York Times and for Time Magazine. It was an incredible trip.
Is this the most intimate relationship you have had with the subject? Is this the most intimate relationship?
Okay, so I am going to answer your question, but let me go back for a second. So this is Mr. Eddie, the Aboriginal man that traveled with her, and I love her statement about Mr. Eddie.
Yeah.
I'll show you the scene.
Dim the lights.
So one day I was in Hong Kong, and I was working as a writer, and of course all my friends knew I was shooting the story because I couldn't stop talking about it. And I came in at breakfast to meet this guy. His name was Richard Bernstein. He was the bureau chief for Time Magazine in Hong Kong, and I met him at the Hilton for breakfast, and I walked in, and he was looking very pale, and he said, "You better sit down." And I said, "What?" He said, "Just sit down." And he hands me the local Hong Kong English paper that says, "Mysterious camel lady missing in Gibson Desert, desperate search underway." And my heart just sank as I remember thinking, this is the thing I've been afraid of the whole time, that something would happen to her out there, I would never see her again. And I flew back to Australia. When we changed planes in Darwin, they brought all the morning papers on from all over Australia, and all the headlines said, were all about her being missing. I'm sorry, I want to jump ahead here for a second to show you this. The tourists, sorry, this is the baby Goliath. Yeah, as I said, the light out there is incredible. Plants and animals unlike anything you've ever seen anywhere in the world. Bizarre skies, even just like the campfire light was just so magical. This is like, again, that glow at night. So they brought the morning papers on the plane, and I was on my way to Perth, and I thought, okay, well, she's dead, because they actually had my Geographic had released my pictures, and I thought, well, the story hasn't been published in the magazine yet, so there's no way they would let anybody scoop them unless something was seriously wrong and they were looking for her body. So I went down to where I thought she would be. I always had a pretty good sense. I'd leave her and say, okay, in 6 weeks, if I come back in 6 weeks, you're walking 20 miles a day, you should be just about to this place. And when I got to the place where I thought she would be, I now had 80 journalists following me because I'd flown into the local town. There were paparazzi, there were trackers, there were planes, film crews, and everybody immediately knew I was the photographer, and I thought we were all looking for a body, and I drove to where I thought she would be, and she was there and knew nothing about any of this, wasn't lost, nothing was wrong, and before I could say a word, they jumped out of their cars and were thrusting the newspapers in her face with my pictures in it, which I'd shown her earlier in the trip. So here, the whole time I've been hoping she'd understand my loyalties were to her, and before I could say a word, it looks like I've just sold her out to all these people, which made no sense, of course, because why would I do this to my own story, let alone if I was doing this. So it turns out, this is her looking at the pictures, that I shot in the paper. It turns out, so I finally got her away from these people, and she was furious at me, thinking, I said, I didn't print these people, why would I have done that? And she said, what are they all doing here? Why do they think I'm missing? And I said, have you met anybody? Has anything happened during your trip? And she said, oh my God, it was the racing driver. I said, the what? I thought, she was a racing driver, so she's gone crazy again. And she said, no. And 2 weeks ago, in the middle of the night, I hear this noise, and I look up, and this guy comes up in this racing car, like with these big fat tires, like with racing stripes over it. She said, I thought I was hallucinating. And the guy hits on me, and I tell him to piss off, and he goes off, and he was trying to set the world's record of driving across Australia. And it turns out, when he got to Sydney, he had a press conference. And one of the reporters said, what was the most interesting thing that happened to you during your trip as you broke the world's record? He said, I spent a romantic night in the moonlight with a naked camel lady. He made up this whole story about their great romance during the middle of the night, and so suddenly they just fabricated the story that the naked camel lady is now missing. And it just about ruined the whole trip. The scene in the movie was pretty dramatic. She just couldn't believe. When I told her that everybody in the world was talking about the story, because it was the cover of everything. It was the Financial Times, it was the Herald Tribune. It was amazing how this became an insane story. And this was the territory she was going through. I won't go into how we did it, but we managed to. I pretended one night I went to the local town about 20 miles away one night and let one of the reporters supposedly get me drunk. and he said, just tell me where she's going to end the trip and we'll leave her alone. And I said, I'll tell you, but don't tell anybody else. Promise me you won't. You know, I was not drunk and I knew what was going on. And so I told him that she was going to end the trip in Carnarvon, 1,000 miles away from where she was actually going to end it. And so 6 weeks later, they all went to Carnarvon and we went to a place called Hamlin Pool. It actually worked. I couldn't believe it. So this is when she got to the ocean. And they had never seen anything bigger than a puddle before, so you could imagine their reactions to it.
Yeah, I love that picture of little Goliath.
And swimming in the water.
Stupefied.
Yeah.
I have to ask this question, so forgive me in advance, but how did you like the movie?
Oh, I thought the movie was actually beautifully done. One of the things that kind of shocked me is I didn't realize they were going to take my photographs and actually recreate scenes from it. And I'm going to show, if you don't mind, I'll show you a couple of scenes real quickly. Oh, so first of all, you know, because I own the pictures, when Geographic ran their story, it then ran in 100 other magazines 3 months later. They got the first rights to it. So 50 million people around the world read about Robin. It was an incredible story. I mean, everybody wanted to know about this woman. And then again, you know, 2 years later, she called me one day and said, you're not going to believe this, but I've written a book about the trip. And I said, do you want my journals? And she said, no, I've written it, but I want you to read it because I'm not very kind to you in it. So I read it, and you know, I'm an asshole at the beginning, I get better as it goes on. And she said, so do you want me to change any of it? I said, I think people will get the sense of who's writing it. I mean, I'm comfortable with, I think people understand you're a fierce, intense person, and blah, blah, blah. So they tried doing this movie for 30 years. Originally, Julia Roberts was going to play Robin. I think, I mean, whether you like Julia or not, that would have been, I mean, it should be an Australian actress. First of all, I don't think that was the right choice. Then it was going to be Helen Hunt, who I actually got to meet with. It was delightful. And they were making it, it was, you know, done deal, blah, 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 and nothing ever happened. 6 years ago, it was Nicole Kidman. And she's Australian, I guess she would have been good. And so by the time they called me this time, and I got a phone call one day from a guy who said, have you seen The King's Speech? And I said, yeah, it was a great movie. I thought it was a telemarketer or something. And he said, my name's Emil Sherman. I'm the producer of The King's Speech. And I said, oh my God. And so I'm like Googling him. And during getting the Oscar on stage, and I said, what can I do? What can I do for you? And he goes, you know, we're doing the movie about Robin's trip. And you know, I said, you know, no offense, but I've been hearing this now for 30 years. He said, no, we're doing it. And we've cast Mia Wasikowska, this wonderful young actress, and they cast you know, Adam to play me, and I mean, some of the, I'll show you. Let me just show you. This is the trailer to the film. It's really, it's a wonderful movie.
I am planning to walk across the Australian desert from Alice Springs to the Indian Ocean, a distance of 2,000 miles. And when people ask me why I'm doing it, my usual answer is why not?
Your plan is ridiculous.
You must be mad, girlie. You know, that's about 2,000 miles. 6 months of hard walking. You want to die out there or something?
Remarkable similarities between them. So there's Robin on the left. I shot both these pictures, and the filmmakers were really gracious. They flew me to Australia when the movie was being made to be on the set, which was really great fun. And then again when the movie came out, and I was talking to Mia, they were in between shots, and I suddenly said, "Are you wearing the same blouse Robin wore in my pictures?" She said, oh yeah, well, they went through your book and they manufactured, the seamstress actually made, I thought they went and looked for the clothes. She said, no, we made the clothes. And she said, why? And she said, they just wanted it to be accurate. And then I went back and, she's not posing here, we're just talking, but I looked at her hands, and then I looked at like the hair, how they streaked her hair. If you've seen her, she's a complete chameleon actress. She's sort of like Meryl Streep was, where you can't believe it's the same human being from movie to movie. So again, they took like the flannel shirts, they made them, they put holes in them. That was the two of us back then. And I shot this picture and they were walking on the set. Adam's taller. He said he can't grow a beard, so they had to glue it on every day. So I'll show you a couple of scenes very quickly from the film. Let's see.
Dear Sir, I am planning to walk across the Australian desert from Alice Springs to the Indian Ocean, a distance of 2,000 miles. The trip will take 6 to 7 months. I arrived in Alice Springs over a year ago. There are herds of feral camels roaming freely throughout Central Australia, and my idea was to capture a few and train them to carry my gear.
Diggity, stay.
The trip wasn't conceived as an adventure in the sense of something to be proved or conquered. And when people ask me why I'm doing it, my usual answer is why not?
I'm just going to again show you a couple of things very quickly here. So this is very interesting. So here's a picture of her. This is the morning the trip began. And watch how they turn this into a scene in the film.
Hey, Dookie. Hey, Dookie. Hello. Hey.
So this is the creepy guy who ripped her off. I'm going to meet him in a minute.
So you want to play with the camels? Always watch the animal. Watch how he thinks. Hello, who's boss?
I'm going to go quickly here. So this is a cattle bore. They dig these deep wells for the cattle to drink out of. And watch how they turn this into a wonderful scene in the movie. I love this picture. It's just that it's just wonderful. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So, you know, a lot of the tourists would treat the Aborigines with great condescension, like they were primitives, savages. And at one point, this group, this is my photograph, but you see how they turn this into a really telling scene in the movie, how Mr. Eddie gets his revenge.
Hold up there, love. Thank you, photo.
Please stop so I can take a photo. Wait. Where are you heading?
Thanks, love. How far are you going?
I'm going to the ocean. To the ocean? You're dreaming.
Hey, Jackie Jack. Go photo with the camel, boy. Take a
Hey,
picture, eh?
Jack,
Hey, whoa, steady.
you're a prick. Bloody swine.
Hey. Give me money. Give me money, give me money.
So, Eddie's very insistent that you take along an elder.
Yeah, I prefer to do this stretch on my own.
Yeah, but it's better to do a stretch with company.
It'll be fun.
You won't find a drop of water. It'll be 2 months travel on a dead straight track through empty desert. It's lucky to get 6 cars a year along it.
I'll be fine.
Would it make any difference if I told you I didn't want you to go alone?
What do you think?
Well, I think you have a problem with people. You know, I'm sorry, but I'm driving ahead to Luna and dropping water drums along the track.
That's almost 1,000 miles out of your way.
Yeah, I know how far it is.
Are you sure?
100%. I'll mark the drop points on your map.
Okay. Thanks.
That's probably my favorite picture in the book. And this is Mia. They actually had to color the water more dark in the movie. They actually went in, and this is the scene where she gets to the ocean. And the one thing I want you to look at is, I was telling Bill this before, that the day before the trip, Robin had said to me, could I just be at the ocean without you being there? Like when I get there, and I didn't say anything. She said, all right, I know you have to be there. So in the movie, they have me waiting at the beach for her without a camera, right? Which, when in the movie's maker said, well, we want to show how you become part of her trip and you're not outside looking in anymore. I said, what photographer, after 9 months of traveling and documenting this woman, would not have a camera? So
There's the money shot.
yeah, exactly. So in the movie, this is how I use the raft. end of each screening, Robin and I would do a Q&A with the audience, and this one woman comes up and says, so at the end when you dive underwater, was that you committing suicide? And Robin said, excuse me? And she said, I was a little confused, so was that you committing suicide when you dive underwater? And Robin said, yeah, that was me committing suicide. It was so funny. It's very, very strange. So I'm going to do two things, which is, if you want to meet Robin today, I was going to, my 15-year-old daughter, she did this a year ago, did a quick interview with Robin. And I'm just going to show you for a second because it's kind of interesting. My daughter, I kept saying, you've got to make a list of questions, you have to rehearse. And she said, Dad, because the kids all watch all these TV shows like iCarly and think they can just
go out and do this. So she refused to make up a list of questions. We're in the taxi on the way over there. She's never done this before, and I thought it was going to be deer in headlights. When she's actually sitting there in the studio, she's going to freeze up. So this is what happened.
Hi, my name is Phoebe Smolan, and I am a TFK Kid contributor. Today with me I have Robin Davidson. In 1977, she took a 1,700-mile trek across the Australian outback. Sent to take pictures of her trip was my father, Rick Smolan. He worked for National Geographic magazine. You took this amazing journey across the outback. What inspired that?
Oh, it's so hard to say. I was a very young woman. I was 23 when I made the decision to go to Central Australia and get myself some camels and go across the deserts of Australia. And I think I just was tired of the kind of life I was living. And at that time, there weren't as many opportunities for young women as there are now. Mm-hmm. So I just thought I should kind of expand my experience.
I know you traveled with a few camels and your dog, right?
Yeah.
Why camels?
Well, I had very little money, and I knew that there were these feral wild camels in Australia, so I figured, well, I'll just go out there and I will find myself some of these feral wild camels. I'll just somehow find them, and then I'll train them, and then I'll use them to carry all my gear. And it seemed to me that that was extremely practical and normal. And I couldn't afford a Jeep, so hey.
Wasikowska is the girl who plays you.
Mm.
I know you chose her, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you think her performance was in the movie?
Well, I wanted Mia because I think she's a really, really sensational actor. Really good. And they don't come along so often. And the reason that I thought she'd be good, apart from her acting skills, is that she kind of has, you can tell that she has an intense inner life, and that informs the way she acts. And because the film, it's the story really of a woman being alone 99% of the time, so that actress has to be able to transmit the emotions of being alone and what happens to your way of thinking when you've been alone for a long time with very little dialogue. So it's quite a difficult book to translate to film that way, and I think she does a fantastic job.
I know my dad joined you on the trip, even though at first he wasn't welcome. Why did you want to go on your trip alone?
Well, your dad was the photographer who documented the journey. And my whole conception of what I wanted to do, right from the beginning and indeed till almost the end, was that it was essential that I do it on my own. That was the way I would kind of find out what I was capable of. After the 2 years of preparations, I still didn't have enough money to pull the thing together and buy the gear that I needed, and I'd met your dad, Rick, and he suggested I write to a magazine for sponsorship, which I did, and I succeeded, and that meant that Rick would have to be there to document it for the magazine. So I gave your dad a very hard time.
Anyway. The one last thing I wanted to say was, and I want to open this to questions, is that there's a really cool technology we built into the book where you can point your smartphone or your tablet, Android or iOS, at 20 different pictures in the book, and it recognizes that picture and will play that scene in the movie. So you see the real Robin, and then on your phone you see that picture, and it's really delightful. Bill, I wanted to point out, Bill Atkinson, who's sitting in the front row here, is the man who invented HyperCard. If you think of the World Wide Web, when we click on a link, this is the gentleman who brought this to the entire, to our species. And I'm so honored that Bill came today. I was going to show the Erasmus thing, this technology, for 1 second. Is that?
Sure.
You mind?
Oh, I've got to.
Bill, do you want to come up for a second? Just hold this for me. Turn you into Vanna White here. So if you hold this up for me, or do you actually have it built into yours? I was going to show it on an iPad, but either way. It's really cool. And it sort of gives you an insight. I'm sorry, another one? Okay.
How about the one at the end where she hits the water?
Okay. Let's see.
We just launched this app. It's a free app that runs on Apple stuff and Android stuff, and it runs on tablets and
Try
smartphones.
that.
And it just recognizes the picture and syncs into it. And streams live video. And all you have to do to set it up is you say, I'm following inside tracks. And so it knows that it's supposed to look for those pictures.
You know, the weirdest thing is if you go back to the 1978 National Geographic, it works on the pictures in that. So there's nothing embedded in the picture. It's like a fingerprint. When it sees that image, it recognizes
Much
that
better
picture.
than one of these stupid QR codes that are ugly.
That's wild.
This
Yeah,
is
no, I
looking
hate
at a
QR.
photograph. It's amazing technology they've done. I'm here partly because I'm working on a book of my own that will have this technology in it.
What's the name of the app?
But
It's
Bill,
called
careful
Erasmus.
Careful of your wine, Bill.
Well, what?
It's called Erasmus. The things that you recognize are auras. So they're like, when you're authoring this stuff, you set up, here's the trigger picture. If you see this, play this. And you just sort
Yeah,
of
you
drag
can,
and
you
drop.
can do it. Kids are doing this in school now with using
How do you spell
HP's
that?
app, Erasmus.
AURASMA.
Yeah, AURASMA. It's a free app that anybody can use. It's really
And it
cool.
plays back auras.
Would there be an occasion when you would be in Australia and you could show this new technology to Eddie?
Mr. Eddie's no longer alive, but his daughter came to one of the screenings, which is really cool. I got to meet her, and she was on stage with us during one of the Q&As. So he had, Robin still is so attached to Mr. Eddie's family. He had, as I said, he had a remarkable effect on a real trip, and in the movie he's so well represented. It's a wonderful part of the movie.
These days they have Wi-Fi in Australia, so it probably even would work.
The movie's available on Amazon, by the way, so you can see, and also Comcast and all that. So you can, as of a week ago, it's like available for streaming and all that, which is exciting. Yes.
Beautiful movie.
Rick, I wanted to know about the connection with animals. In the movie, Mia seemed to have connection with the camels. How did that?
It's remarkable. Mia was incredible. Robin actually spent 3 weeks with Mia before they started shooting the movie. And the camels, the camels are camels. They're animals, right? And you could see they trusted her just the way that Robin's camels trusted her. That was there was a funny thing that happened when I went down to Australia. They said, "Do you want to be in the movie?" They put me in one little scene, and they put me in the makeup trailer. And I walked in, and Mia was already in there. They were putting makeup on her, and I sat in the barber chair next to her. They were trying to make me look like I was all sunburned. And I was talking to Mia, and then Adam walked in, and they pulled a curtain between us because they were putting makeup all over her body or something. And Mia said, "Rick," and I said, "Yeah." She goes, "No, the other Rick." I said, "What?" She goes, "Oh, because we've got camels, dogs, wind, and we're shooting on film, the director asked us to call each other by our stage names for the last 2 months, because if I screw up and say Adam, I've blown the entire scene." But it was like the whole thing was so surreal. Anyway.
I've been replaced.
Yeah, yes.
Well, did you ever have a romantic relationship?
Yeah, no, I was, as I said, I was with her, and eventually I was the only guy out there, so I was probably any. No, we've remained very good friends over the years. We were romantically involved for several months during the trip, and for a little while afterwards. And then, this is a weird story, but at the end of her trip, she had made me read every book written by Doris Lessing during the trip, because Doris was her hero, and Robin wanted to be a writer, and so I read Briefing for Descent into Hell, The Golden Notebook, wonderful books that I would never voluntarily read, but I loved them. They were wonderful books. And so I said to Robin at the end of the trip, if you want to meet Doris Lessing, anybody in the world you want to meet, you can just write to them. And she said, Rick, I'm some girl covered with camel dung, walking down in the middle of like nowhere. Why would anybody find this interesting? I said, believe me, when this story appears. So one day I picked up her mail in Perth and it said D. Lessing, London, England. I said, what's this? And she said, oh, I wrote to her care of her publisher. I can't. So I said, what does it say? And it said, dear Robin, I've been reading about you in the press because of all the paparazzi. And it said, if you ever come to England, visit me. So my present to this woman I love was a trip to England to meet Doris Lessing. And so Doris actually invited her to live with her for a few months. And apparently a month after she got to England, Doris would have writer salons on Friday nights in her home. And Salman Rushdie came to one of the writer salons and they fell in love. And so Robin's the blonde reporter in Satanic Verses. She beds the whole character on her. If you read Satanic Verses, it's completely Robin's personality. So it's one of those, again, something that nobody knows about. That was the end of our... Yes?
Two questions. One of them, did Diggity Berry die of strychnine poisoning?
Diggity unfortunately did get poisoned. The ranchers in Australia believe that dingoes, wild dogs like our wolves, kill their sheep. And there's always been a great debate in Australia about whether they only kill old and infirmed and sick sheep or healthy sheep. Nevertheless, a lot of the ranchers will fly over with light airplanes and drop meat which has been injected with strychnine to kill the dingoes. And she had been warned about this when she was crossing one of these cattle properties. And they said, put a muzzle on your dog because we don't want your dog to get poisoned. And she said she tried, and she never even had a collar on Diggity, and Diggity thought she was being punished. And so Robin would try to feed her enough, hoping that she wouldn't take a poison bait. And one night, Diggity ran off and came back and started throwing up. And I wasn't there when it happened. It was just, when she told me the story, it was just so awful. And the thing about Robin, which is amazing, is that she said she shot Diggity and to put her out of her misery. And I couldn't have done it. I would have just kept thinking, it's food poisoning, she'll get better. I mean, I have goosebumps now telling the story. It was so horrible, but she... at that point she wanted to call the whole trip off also. She was so, when I found her like a week later, it also overlapped with the paparazzi finding her, and it was just so horrible.
My second question was, what does Robin care about now? Where is she?
Robin never got married, never had kids, lived in India with an Indian prince for 15 years, did a camel trip in India for a year for National Geographic, believe it or not. She's written 8 books, I think, now. Her Tracks, this book, is now taught in Australian high schools the way that Catcher in the Rye is taught here. There are study guides about it. There's like a 30-page guide that they use with high school students. She's still trying to find herself. She's coming here to the States to speak at the EG conference in Monterey. Oh, I'm supposed to tell everybody something. I just remembered, thank you, you just reminded me. If you haven't seen Tracks, there's a special screening of it at the Rafael Theater on May 13th at 7 p.m. It's a benefit for the Family Literacy Foundation. So May 13th, 7 p.m. at the Rafael Theater. Hope I answered your question. Yes?
What happened with the camels at the end of it?
Great question. What happened with the camels? So just before we got to the ocean, she found a family that lived about 10 miles away from the ocean, and she left the camels with them, and they took care of the camels, and they had young children, and it was the perfect place. She went back and visited them. You're right. I mean, it's so few people don't ask that question. Yeah, it was really hard for her to say goodbye. She talks about it in the book. It was like, it was just, her heart was like broken, but she managed to move on. Yes.
How accessible is the National Geographic issue?
You can look for it online, and some people.
I did, and I think it's way too old.
Yeah, I have some copies of it. Talk to me afterwards.
What year or what is it?
1978 June. I think it was June, the June issue. I think. Yes.
Our Mill Valley Library has a basement, and I was able to get it transferred, and I read it. So Mill Valley Library.
And we have lots of copies of the book here tonight, thanks to our friends at Book Passage. if anybody would like one autographed, I'm happy to autograph them. I've done a lot of books over the years. Bill and I were neighbors in Mill Valley for many years. We were doing, a lot of the day in life books and books like that. This book, I did this through Kickstarter and I self-published it because every publisher I went to, I wanted 6-color printing, I wanted spot varnish, I wanted the Erasmus technology, and everybody said, oh, it's an old story, what if the movie's not successful? And through Kickstarter it was very successful, and now, much to my pleasure, it's become, I think, the #1 best-selling solo travel book on Amazon, which is really thrilling. Book Passage is one of these special bookstores that, the whole time when I moved to Mill Valley, this is the place I hang out every moment I wasn't doing something else, and I'm really honored to have been invited. And Bill, thank you so much for the interview.
This has been a great, it's been a lot of fun, and my appreciation for what you did and what went into the book is so much greater now than it was before. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you to both of you.